Right now, you're doing something no other animal on Earth has ever figured out how to do. You're taking marks on a screen, squiggles, really, if you think about it, and turning them directly into thoughts inside your head. I'm not talking to you, I'm not even in the room, and yet somehow information is moving from my brain into yours. That should be impossible, and for about 300,000 years of human existence, it was. For almost the entire time our species has existed, if you wanted to know something, you had to hear it from someone's mouth or see it with your own eyes. The moment a person died, whatever they knew, the way to treat a wound, the location of a good hunting ground, the words to a song, died with them, unless someone else happened to remember it too. Then, about 5,000 years ago, in the mud between two rivers, a handful of accountants, not poets, not priests, not philosophers, accountants, stumbled into inventing the single most powerful piece of technology humans have ever created. And the strange part, they weren't trying to write, they were trying to count sheep. To understand why writing had to be invented, you first need to understand what life was like without it. Picture a small farming village 10,000 years ago. You know everyone. You know how many goats your neighbor owns because you watched him raise them. If he owes you 3 baskets of grain, you remember it, he remembers it, and if either of you forgets, someone else in the village probably remembers for you. Memory is the record-keeping system, and for a village of 100 people, that system works fine. Now fast forward to around 3400 BCE in a city called Uruk, in what's now southern Iraq. Uruk isn't a village anymore. It's the largest city that has ever existed on Earth up to that point. Some 40,000 people, packed inside mud brick walls, all depending on a temple economy that collects grain, beer, wool, and livestock from thousands of farmers and redistributes it to workers, priests, and soldiers. Suddenly, just remember it doesn't work. Nobody's brain can hold that. You don't know your baker, you don't know the shepherd 3 districts over who owes the temple 40 sheep. The entire trust your memory system that had worked for hundreds of thousands of years simply breaks under the weight of a city. This is the exact same problem, by the way, that we saw drive the invention of guns, a technology born not from some grand idea, but from an unglamorous, practical bottleneck that regular life had run into. Writing has the same origin story. It wasn't born from inspiration, it was born from bookkeeping. And the first solution humans came up with wasn't writing at all. It was something much stranger: clay marbles. Here's something almost nobody knows, and it's one of the strangest detours in human history. Starting around 8000 BCE, that's nearly 5,000 years before actual writing, people across the Middle East were using small clay tokens to represent goods. A cone-shaped token meant a small measure of grain. A sphere meant a larger measure. A cylinder might represent an animal. If you owed someone 10 sheep, you didn't write 10 sheep. You handed over 10 cylinder-shaped tokens, or you sealed 10 tokens inside a hollow clay ball. Think of it like a 5,000-year-old invoice, except the invoice is a ball of mud with rocks hidden inside it. There's just one obvious problem with that system, and it's the same problem you'd have with any sealed envelope. Once you seal the tokens inside, how do you check what's inside without breaking it open? Someone, we'll never know who, and that alone should bother you, came up with an elegant fix. Before sealing the tokens inside the clay ball, press each token into the outside of the wet clay first. Now the ball has a physical record of its own contents stamped right on its surface. 10 little circular impressions on the outside mean 10 sphere tokens are sealed inside. And here's the moment everything changes, so slow down and actually picture this. At some point, some unnamed Sumerian bureaucrat looked at that clay ball covered in impressions and had a thought that would end up shaping the next 5,000 years of human civilization. Why do I need the tokens at all? Why not just press the shapes into a flat piece of clay and skip the tokens completely? That's it. That's the birth of writing. Not poetry, not a message to the gods, a receipt that got lazy. Once Sumerians started drawing directly onto flat clay tablets instead of using physical tokens, something opened up that tokens could never do. You could draw anything. not just the handful of goods that had a matching token shape. Early tablets from Uruk, dated to around 3300 BCE, show simple pictures: a jar shape for beer, a head with a bowl for ration, a stylized ear of grain. This stage is called proto-writing, and honestly, at this point, it's closer to a spreadsheet than a language. These early tablets record only nouns and numbers. There's no grammar, no verbs, no sentences. You couldn't write, "The shepherd loves his flock." You could only write, "Shepherd, 40 sheep." For a few hundred years, this picture-based system limped along, and it had a massive limitation. Pictures can only show you things that look like something. How do you draw the word "and"? How do you draw someone's name? You can't sketch a picture of a sound. This is the moment where writing almost stayed a glorified filing system forever, a dead end, useful for temple accounting and nothing else. What broke it open was one of the cleverest tricks in the history of human thought, and it's called the rebus principle. Here's how it works. Imagine in English you wanted to write the word belief, but you only had pictures to work with. You couldn't draw an abstract concept like belief, but you could draw a bee, and then you could draw a leaf. Bee, leaf. Say them together fast. Bee leaf, belief. That's exactly what Sumerian scribes figured out, except in their language. The Sumerian word for arrow, T, was easy to draw. It's just a picture of an arrow. But the Sumerian word for life was also pronounced T. Suddenly, a scribe could draw an arrow not to mean arrow, but to mean the completely unrelated, undrawable concept of life, purely because the two words sounded the same. This is the actual birth of phonetic writing, writing that captures sound, not just things. And once that leap happened, writing stopped being a picture book and became a language. You could now write anything you could say: names, grammar, prayers, laws, insults, love. There's one more twist. As scribes wrote faster and faster on wet clay using a reed stylus, the curved pictures got harder and harder to draw cleanly. Clay resists curves, it wants straight lines pressed in at an angle. Over a few centuries, the once recognizable pictures flattened out into abstract clusters of wedge-shaped marks. This final form is called cuneiform, from the Latin for wedge-shaped, and by around 2900 BCE, the original pictures were gone completely. If you showed a cuneiform tablet to the person who invented the first clay token 5,000 years earlier, they wouldn't recognize a single symbol on it. Here's where the story stops being about one clever accountant in one city and becomes something much bigger. Sumer wasn't the only place this happened. Roughly 1,000 years later, ancient Egyptians developed hieroglyphics. Around 1200 BCE, Chinese scribes were carving questions to their ancestors onto turtle shells and ox bones, the earliest form of Chinese script, discovered, oddly enough, from bones sold in the 1800s as dragon bones in traditional medicine shops before anyone realized they were covered in the earliest Chinese writing ever found. And on the other side of the planet, with zero contact with Mesopotamia, Egypt, or China, the Maya and Zapotec civilizations of Mesoamerica independently invented their own complete writing systems, 4 separate times in 4 unconnected corners of the world, with no communication between them whatsoever. Humans arrived at the same solution to the same problem. That should stop you in your tracks, because it means writing wasn't a 1 in a billion fluke that happened to occur once in Iraq. It means that whenever a human society crosses a certain threshold, a certain size, a certain complexity, a certain need to track debts and harvests and laws across more people than one brain can hold, something in us reaches for the same tool, independently, every time. Compare that to any other species on this planet. Elephants have remarkable memories. Crows can solve multi-step puzzles. Chimpanzees can learn hundreds of hand signs. But not one other species anywhere has ever taken the leap from "I remember this" to "I will invent a permanent, external, transferable symbol so that someone who isn't born yet can know what I knew." That's not a difference of intelligence. Plenty of animals are shockingly intelligent. It's a difference in a very specific, very strange human habit: the drive to get information outside of our own skulls so it can outlive us. Every species on Earth is stuck carrying its knowledge around in a body that eventually dies. We found a workaround, and we found it 4 separate times before any of these civilizations even knew the others existed. For the first several centuries of writing, almost nothing written down was personal. It was inventories, tax records, temple accounts, the ancient equivalent of spreadsheets. Nobody was signing their name to any of it, because nobody thought of writing as something that belonged to an individual voice. It belonged to the temple, to the bureaucracy, to the record. Then, around 2285 BCE, something happens that quietly breaks that pattern forever. A Sumerian Akkadian woman named Enheduanna, the daughter of King Sargon of Akkad and the high priestess of the moon god Nanna in the city of Ur, writes a set of hymns to the goddess Inanna. And unlike every clay tablet before her, she does something nobody had bothered to do with writing in the roughly 1,000 years since its invention. She puts her own name on it in the first person as the author. Enheduanna is, as far as archaeology can currently prove, the very first named author in the history of the human species. Not just the first named woman writer, the first named writer, full stop, of any gender that we can point to and say, this specific human composed this specific text and wanted us to know it. Sit with how strange that is. Writing existed for 1,000 years as pure administration before a single human being thought to use it to say, in effect, this is mine, this came from me. The technology built to track grain and sheep eventually got hijacked for something its inventors probably never imagined: identity, legacy, the desire to be remembered by name, by strangers, forever. That hijacking, from bookkeeping tool to vessel for the individual human voice, might be the single most consequential accident in the entire history of writing. Every book you've ever read with an author's name on the cover is a distant descendant of that decision Enheduanna made 4,300 years ago. It's worth being honest about something the invention of writing story usually skips over. For most of its history, writing was not a gift given to everyone. It was a locked door. In Mesopotamia, becoming a scribe meant years at an eduba, literally tablet house, a school where boys, almost always from wealthier families, were trained through brutal repetition and, according to surviving tablets that are basically ancient student complaints, regular beatings. One surviving Sumerian tablet has a student grumbling that he was struck for talking, for standing up without permission, for handwriting that wasn't neat enough. A 4,000-year-old detention slip, more or less. Why so restrictive? Because whoever controlled writing controlled the records, and whoever controlled the records controlled who owed what to whom, who owned what land, who the king said was guilty or innocent. Literacy wasn't just a skill. For thousands of years, across nearly every civilization that developed writing, it was one of the most heavily guarded forms of power that existed. That's the uncomfortable flip side of this invention. The same tool that let humans defeat the death of memory also became one of the first tools ever used to divide humans into those who had power and those who didn't. It took millennia and no small number of revolutions for that door to swing open to the rest of us. So how did humans invent the first written language? Not with a flash of genius, not with a prophet handing down sacred symbols. It happened because a city in the desert got too big for anyone's memory to hold, and some anonymous accountant, tired of sealing tokens inside balls of mud, pressed a shape into wet clay and realized the token itself was now optional. From there, it snowballed in ways nobody could have predicted. A trick with sound-alike words turned a filing system into a language. That language got reinvented from scratch, independently, on at least 3 other continents, by people who had never heard of Sumer and never would. And within that language, one priestess eventually looked at a tool built for counting sheep and used it for what might be the very first time to say, I made this, remember me. Every text message, every book, every road sign, every love letter you've ever read is standing on top of that one accountant's shortcut. 5,500 years later, we are, as far as we can tell, the only species that ever looked at the problem of forgetting and decided to build a permanent workaround for it. And it started, almost embarrassingly, with a shepherd who owed the temple 40 sheep. If you want to see what happened next, how humans took this same restless problem-solving instinct and used it to build one of the deadliest tools our species has ever made, go watch How Did Humans Invent Guns right after this. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into the strange, accidental ways humans became human, make sure you're subscribed because there's a lot more of this story left to tell.